Kia ora everyone, and welcome to this very special webinar hosted by the National Association of Women in Construction, NAWIC. My name is Jehan Casinader, and it's great to be with you on this very wintry evening. Tonight's webinar is all about legacy in action. And as part of NAWIC's 30 Years of Impact celebrations, we're bringing together four recipients of the Helen Tippett Award. So, who was Helen Tippett? Well, she was a woman of immense mana, intellect, and influence. She was a real pioneer who championed women in construction. Helen trained as an architect in Melbourne in the 1950s, and she went on to have this huge impact on design and also in academia and building regulation as well. Helen became the first woman professor of architecture at Victoria University, and she also became the first woman president of the New Zealand Institute of Architects. She helped establish NAWIC because she believed that the construction world would be stronger when more women were able to thrive. And at the NAWIC Excellence Awards, which are, of course, coming up next week, the Premier Award is named after Professor Tippett. The Helen Tippett Award recognises an individual who's demonstrated outstanding leadership, advocacy, and commitment to advancing women in construction. So, tonight, we're going to hear from four of the previous winners of this award so we can discover the personal stories behind their leadership and how they are continuing Helen's wonderful legacy. So I'm very pleased to introduce our four panelists. Priyani de Silva-Currie, the winner of the Helen Tippett Award in 2024. Becky Cox, who won the award in 2022. Anita Varga, who took home the trophy in 2023. And rounding out our panel, Sonja Lister, who won the award just last year in 2025. Welcome to you all. We're so excited to hear some of your story tonight. And a reminder for those of you who are joining us at home or in the car or at work or wherever you might be this evening, we'd love for you to be part of the conversation. So put your questions into the chat and we will come to some of those a little bit later in the webinar. Priyani, I would love to begin with you. You are a technical fellow at Becker and you've had such an incredible journey. You came to New Zealand as a refugee and you developed an interest in the construction sector. Where did that come from?
Well, thanks, Jahan. Yes, I came to New Zealand as a refugee in Christmas Eve, actually, 1974, with my mum and my dad. And I was introduced to the construction sector when I went to work for Nelson City Council in a role which was really hands-on, looking after property and facilities. So everything from swimming pools to pensioner housing and everything in between. So that's where I first got a taste of construction and how to look after our built environment.
And when did you start to realize the unique needs and opportunities for women in the construction sector?
Well, probably I didn't see unique opportunities at that time. I saw lots of challenges. Um, when I was younger and in that role, it was very dominated as a male industry. And I was definitely seen as someone who was different, not just different in my that I was a woman, but also different in colour and creed and just different entirely. And so for me, it was pretty challenging to find my place in the sector and to find some sort of acceptance in the sector.
Absolutely. And these days we often hear that phrase, you have to see it to be it. What was that like back then? Were there any role models or anyone that you can look to who gave you a sense that there was a contribution that you could make in construction?
Well, there wasn't any in construction for me that were women.
Mm,
So all the role models I had were guys, were men, and that was hard. But I had a really amazing role model in my mum,
wow.
and she was incredible. She was a woman who did so much and achieved so much in a man's world from the early 1920s onwards, and she was really a trailblazer herself. So for me, I had someone at home who constantly tried to help me to succeed, and gave me advice about things that, not to let anything stand in the way of becoming successful.
And so, given the challenges in the environment that you were entering, how did you find the resilience, the determination, the courage to develop your own plan for what you might be able to achieve?
I think that courage is something I didn't start off with for sure. I was really nervous about mucking it up or making a mistake, and something career limiting potentially. I did develop courage over time as I got a bit of success and things didn't go wrong. That gave me courage, and the family support that I got from my husband and my parents and my friends was amazing, and I couldn't do it without them. It takes a village, and literally, it took a village to create me into what I am today. Um, I just think it's not something that you can do by yourself. You need to have people around you who will kind of lift you up when things get pretty tough, and they do.
And often, in our culture, we focus on the individual journey, the individual aspirations, but really what you're highlighting there is the power of that community or village around you to lift you up and show you what's possible. In the work that you're doing now, how are you helping others to understand their potential?
Well, I would hope that I'm trying to open some doors for others, especially women, where I didn't have doors open for me per se, but I'm just trying to help them to have an easier path than what I did or what my mum did. And so even if I could just do a little bit, introducing somebody, taking someone with me to a site meeting, those little things which will make a difference to someone's confidence and belief that they can do this job in construction.
That's incredible. You co-authored a paper called Diversity Powers Innovation, which I think most of us, if not all of us on this call, we understand that. It makes sense. But we also see the word diversity bandied around in some pretty intense cultural conversations at the moment, the culture wars, as they are sometimes described. How do you feel about the term diversity now, and what does it mean to you?
Diversity is in every single one of us, Jahan. I think no matter what race you come from, what background, what color skin you might have, everybody is diverse. The diversity is in your thoughts rather than on the outside in your surface. So for me, diversity of thought is what creates innovation, and having a room full of different people with different perspectives will always create a better outcome than a group of homogenous thinkers. So that's where I go with diversity. I know it's easy to look for the face, the stuff that's just at surface level, but I think we've got to look deeper to how people think and the diversity of opinion.
Beautifully put, Priyani. So great to have you here as part of this conversation. And a reminder, if you have a question for Priyani or any of our panelists, please pop them into the chat and we'll come to them very soon. Next up, Becky Cox. Wonderful to have you with us, Becky. Becky is National HSQE Manager for Civil at Fulton Hogan. Becky, how did you get into construction?
Kia ora, Jahan. Well, I didn't come into construction on purpose, to be honest. I jumped through quite a few industries and had a dabble at a few different things, and I took a punt on a role in construction and jumped in. And look, I loved it. What I loved about it was just the sheer opportunity. There were just so many things happening under the one roof, and I was hooked. I was hooked ever since.
And similar to Priyani, in the early part of your time in the sector, did you see those challenges and those obstacles that we know so many women and girls face in the early stages of their construction career?
Yeah, 100%. I think, 12, 13 years ago, it was a really different landscape to what we see now. It's still got a long way to come, but certainly didn't see any women in leadership roles, any women in frontline operational roles. It was very much administration. So it's been fantastic to see the growth that's happened over those 12 years. But yeah, still a wee way to go.
I know that in your role, you've focused a lot on building relationships with the community and iwi and other organizations. Why has that been so important to you?
Yeah, look, it's been really important, I think, particularly for our industry, bringing young women into the business. There's not a lot of those entry level opportunities. And so working with community and iwi and schools just to understand, how do we make that build that bridge between that school and work and just create those opportunities. So that's been a really important piece for me is just understanding what are the missing pieces and how do we actually get these young women through the door because half the time they're actually just they don't think it's for them and they don't see the opportunity. So how do we reach out to pull them in?
So, in a world where we have TikTok and everything else in the world of social media, we have so many different ways to communicate and tell the story and market. How can we use these modern tools to show younger people what's actually possible in the sector?
That's yeah, that'd be great. And I don't think we utilize it as much, right?
Hmm.
I think, when you see typical videos and stuff on TikTok and Instagram, it's very much targeted at, male road workers. So I think certainly having more content like that up online and available just so that young women can see themselves there. The whole, if you don't see it, you can't become it, right?
Absolutely.
It's really important and it's just an untapped potential.
I know that you've worked with careers advisors as well, and I'm really interested to know whether you see an evolution and a maturity in the way that careers professionals are talking about the trades to young people, or are we still burdened by those old stereotypes around building and construction?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's changing. Certainly from my experience with career advisors, there was a big knowledge gap on what construction actually looked like and what the opportunities actually were. So I think there's still some barriers there with schools actually understanding what's on offer in construction. It's not really as obvious as what we might think it is. So there's definitely conversations to be had there, but I'm certainly seeing it promoted much more in schools and through those advisors. Because at the end of the day, they only know what they know and what they've been exposed to. So there's a piece there for us too to bridge that knowledge gap for them.
Absolutely. And I know that you've also engaged with prison rehabilitation groups. Tell us about that.
Oh yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, so spent some time coaching some young women that had come out of prison and looking to enter the workforce.
Wow.
So it was just around sort of coaching and how to put their best foot forward and, what employers are looking for. And, we sort of, I think we underestimate the challenges that people go through on the outside. And, for most of us, it's just about coming home to our nice warm house. But for some people, it's, restarting their entire lives after serving time. So, yeah, it was pretty tough. It was pretty challenging, but look, I loved it. They were hungry and eager to learn and really wanted to better themselves. So I'm all for that.
What are the things that still get in the way of women making progress in this sector? What are the th if you had to pick two or three things that are at the top of your list that you'd like us to focus on, what would those things be?
Oh, um, I think I think still one of the biggest challenges for women in our industry is the lack of confidence that they have. I think they don't believe in their own power or their own intelligence and just don't put themselves forward enough for roles. And that's for a number of reasons, right? I think what they see is men in these roles and not a lot of women. So it can be a real big barrier to get past. I think definitely the confidence. That's a huge one.
Absolutely. And do you think that male allyship, having male leaders who recognize some of the elements of the conversation that we're having tonight, has helped? Has it made a meaningful difference, or is there still a long way to go on that front?
Oh, look, I've been lucky enough to have some amazing male and female mentors through my career, and it comes from both sides. And I think it's just really important to get behind these young women and encourage them, put themselves out there, apply for these roles. I think we do have some great people in the industry already. It's just bringing the rest up to that speed as well.
Absolutely. Very well put. Thank you so much. And now we head to Anita Varga, who is the Bay of Plenty Regional Manager at Fulton Hogan. 30 years of experience. You must have seen a lot in your time, Anita. Oh, you're muted, Anita.
There you go. 30 years, I'm getting old. That's the trouble. Yeah, definitely a lot of change over 30 years. And yeah, I've seen a lot, I've heard a lot. So yeah. What would you like to know?
What was it like for you back in the day when you joined this wonderful industry?
So a bit like Priyani talked about, there weren't female role models. So I moved back from Australia in my sort of late 20s, and I'd worked for a company in Australia, BP, and there were a lot of female leaders at BP. And so I thought that was normal because I'd spent my 20s there, came back to New Zealand, and there were no women in construction. So when I joined Fulton Hogan, yeah, it was a little bit intimidating, to be honest. I think there was one other woman in the office, and so there was two of us in a branch of about 60 men. So, but yeah, I think you just find a way. You make your way. It becomes the norm. Over time, you forget that you're the only woman until you're reminded in a boardroom or something that maybe you're there to take the minutes and you actually don't hold any value. But yeah, everyone knows what it was like, probably.
You started in finance, Anita.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
moved into operations. What was that transition like for you?
Yeah, so when I say I started in finance, it was within the construction sector, so working in the operational business, but in the finance side of the operational business. I kind of hit a bit of a crossroads where I needed a change. I'd been sort of like a commercial manager for a region for quite a number of years, and I was really interested in going into operations. So I moved into a role where I was looking after a mechanical workshop, a big transport team, a traffic management team, and basically that kind of it really sowed that seed of taking the finance side of it and applying it to a business. And so then it became more about how do I manage the business rather than just looking at purely the operation. But the more I kind of delved into it, the more where there were women in the field, and there weren't many, but I had a couple, just realizing the appalling conditions that they were working under. And they were kind of hidden away in the background. So as a person working in the office, I had no idea. And I think that's what really started to make me realize I could make a real difference in operations. So, yeah.
Great. Often we focus on mindset and resilience and personal development, and we think about, well, how do we get people to feel more confident in themselves so they can put their hands up for opportunities, etc. But the other half of that equation is the working environment, right? And the
Mhm.
conditions that they're in. So do you think we're getting that balance right at the moment? Are we making significant enough change in the working conditions that people face, the types of organizational cultures that they come into?
I think it depends on the company that you work in and whether you have enough, I guess, mana to influence those conditions. With the role that I'm in now, I think I came into a region where there were 8% women. And a lot of that was about the conditions and feeling like the odd one out. But, we're sitting at 24% women now. Many of them are leaders of individual businesses that have come up from the ground. So I think what tends to happen is the more women you get in the leadership positions, the conditions in the field change. Then the men that are working with those women see, oh, geez, I hadn't actually thought about that. So then they start thinking about it. So, I had foremen during COVID that said to me, why do we only have one toilet? There's women on site. we need a female toilet. It's terrible they have to share our horrendous toilet. So having men actually identify that the conditions weren't set up for the women that they were now working with. Understanding that they might need to leave a little bit earlier if they were the primary caregiver for the child that they had to pick up from daycare. But with that came more sharing of those duties by all of the people that work with me. You kind of see that the men are now going to pick up the kids from daycare, not just the women. So I think it's just those cultural changes that you can influence when you're leading a big team. It's a bit harder when you're a little bit further down the totem pole, but I guess I sort of moved up and just kept banging the drum until those changes happened.
And as a leader, you have championed change in areas like parental leave and also the creation of part-time roles for people returning to work. Tell us about some of the things that you have been advocating for in recent years.
I think there's some common ones that a lot of companies do, but one of the big ones that we've done recently in my business is champion, rather than just your stock standard EAP counselling for people that are struggling, we're actually championing a menopause counselling service. And so what that means is that where I have a lot of women come into leadership roles later in life, and so they're at perimenopause, in their sometimes early 40s, and it can swing right through until mid-50s. And it's really, really difficult when you're dealing with those conditions and you're sitting in meetings with men. I know what I had to go through and just laugh it off. And it was horribly embarrassing, but you just had to be the joke at the table sometimes. So I've got women that are going through this menopause counselling now, and they just said it's absolutely game-changing for how they're managing their workplace. So maternity workwear, we have our stock standard bright orange or bright yellow workwear. It didn't fit women that have a big belly, that are working on site, that are tramping down, doing their beam testing or jumping in and out of trenches or working in a bitumen plant. So we trialled a whole lot of maternity workwear. Then our company changed that, so we had to employ like a seamstress to adjust the male or female workwear that we had. So just trialing different things rather than we need pink toilets on site. Yeah, well, that should be stock standard. It shouldn't even be a surprise anymore that that's what's needed, but unfortunately in a lot of places it is still needed. Extra weeks leave when a baby arrives for the non-primary caregiver, because it's not just the women that work for me, it's the men's wives that work for me. So if we don't allow those men to have that extra week, they might not be able to spend that first couple of weeks with their brand new baby, Mm-hmm. So we've added an extra week's leave in there, sort of slipped it in under the table because it wasn't stock standard. But as a leader, you are able to do things like that. So I think for me, it's just thinking outside the box, what else?
That's amazing. And you were the only female regional manager at Fulton Hogan. There's now 2 more, I hear.
Yeah, they've been in their roles for a while now, and they're fierce women. So we have one on the East Coast and another one in Central Otago, and I'm sure, there's a few more to come through the business. I think also it's about businesses being ready. Like Becky said, sometimes women just don't have the confidence and don't put themselves forward, and they're absolutely capable. So it's just, I tend to take the view, if I see someone that might be sort of shrinking in the background and I know damn well they can do the job, I just bully them to death until they apply. So there's a lot of women that work for me that might not be where they are if I hadn't just kept picking away at them and try to encourage them, do the study, get some more skills under their belt, and remind them that if they were a man, they'd probably apply and have half of the competencies. It's all about confidence. Yeah.
Absolutely. Good on you, Anita. Thanks so much for sharing. And finally, Sonja Lister, who is leading the consent planning team at Auckland Transport. Welcome, Sonja. How did you end up in the sector?
Kia ora, Jehan. Look, I ended up working at Waitakere City Council back in the day and managed to be able to consent the underground tunnel there at New Lynn. So I was fascinated with all the infrastructure that I saw underground and the beautiful crane work that the girls and boys were doing on site. So I dedicated sort of my consenting pathway and learning into more infrastructure work and consent processing.
Fantastic. And what were your initial impressions of the sector and your place in it, I guess?
Yes, look, much like the others, when I arrived at Waitakere City Council, we still had a typing pool, which was predominantly female, and more than not were asked to provide coffees for councillors rather than lead meetings. So, look, it has taken quite a bit of time for New Zealand to now have those management leaders in wāhine, in particular Stacey van der Putten, now CEO of Auckland Transport just recently. That was a major feat for us, and it was greatly appreciated because she's done such a great mahi, great culture, built up the industry in Auckland Transport, but also the public transport sector nationally to be recognised as a wāhine is fantastic.
That's awesome. And you also have a really significant role within the PSA. Tell us about that.
Correct. So I'm national co-convener with the PSA union. And look, we try and support and advocate, do submissions for improvements in women's work, advocate for any changes in legislation, of course, fighting for a returning of that pay equity legislation back that we lost 12 months ago, because we know that women, when they received that, and we've got research based on when the nurses admin collective was released and they got that pay increase, they spent it locally, they spent it in the regions, they spent it on themselves, they managed to get second-hand better cars, went to the dentist, could actually afford to stop working these second jobs and actually spend more time with their family, which is a better way of life for everyone.
So what motivates you in your day-to-day work? You're clearly contributing to some of these wider societal conversations that we're having as well. What drives you?
Oh, look, what drives me is making sure that we can, like the others, lift everybody else up and seeing if we can break some of those glass ceilings that we still have in the industry. And, it is creating that confidence of not only the younger ones, but the older wāhine that we've got in our workforce too, that may not have had that support. I've been to many student gatherings in support of sort of the union, and many of them say, look, I can't work in this industry because my uncle or my father say I can't, and it's sort of changing those cultural norms and labeling them to be more confident and have those opportunities so they can work alongside their whānau safely and feel sort of appreciated. They can bring back home also their knowledge and share their experiences.
So, Sonja, why do you think those attitudes still persist in our culture, in some pockets of our community, even in 2026?
Look, it's she'll be right kind of number 8 wire sort of culture that we've got still in New Zealand. There still seems to be that dominated factor that the males should run the household, whilst we have and proven that we've got really strong wāhine across many sectors. Unfortunately, it still persists. And whilst we haven't been able to use those social media functions as largely as we can do, because we do seem to focus more on the male, it would be nice to see sort of more TikToks out there. I know that they are starting with some of the younger ones to share their experiences on site and just see more wāhine in the field, be more visible, wearing the maternity gear, PPE gear out on site to show that they can do it too.
Fantastic. And what's top of your wish list in terms of cultural changes or policy changes that will make a difference for women in the sector?
Look, I know that we've managed to get quite a few improvements over time. Sort of the Menopause Act would really help if we had some legislation in that. I know that is in some of the policies, and we are getting an ageing population, and that awareness of it is health matter that people may need to take some extra leave upon, or get some more assistance with, and just that understanding as we age and have an aging population in our sectors across the nation, but also returning that pay equity legislation as well, to make sure that not only our construction workers are paid fairly, but also the associated administration team that supports them are also paid right rate.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing. And we have some time for your questions now. Those of you who are joining us, feel free to pop your questions in the chat. But I'd love to take our conversation back to this incredible woman, Helen Tippett. So, Priyani, when you think about Helen Tippett's journey, what stands out to you?
Helen Tippett was the epitome of a woman trying to find her place in the world, but also excelling at what she did, and not ashamed of that, and not held back by the challenges she faced. She really broke every barrier. Helen Tippett strikes me as a lady who was extremely strong, with heaps of mana, and just went out there and did it, and said, stuff you, everybody else. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be successful, and no one's going to stop me from that. And it's I think it's that single-mindedness that got her to where she was, in a very humble and respectful way. She didn't do it in a bolshy way.
Mm. Anita, we've talked about some of the challenges that the four of you have experienced in the sector. What do you think it must have been like for Helen Tippett at the time in which she was beginning her career?
I would imagine that the old boys network would have been a lot worse than it is today. Just the closing of the ranks, I think. I can't even imagine how someone would navigate that type of behaviour back in the day. I dare say a fair bit of bullying, maybe a bit of sexual harassment. We're very lucky to have had people like her that sort of have broken the back early in our careers to allow us to be able to fly. Yeah.
Absolutely. Becky, what stands out to you in Helen Tippett's story?
Oh, look, I think the title of the award that we have, that change maker, she's been a catalyst for a lot of change, and certainly really defining for NAWIC. I think it must have taken some guts to face what she faced. From my own experience, the challenges that I've been through, and hearing from others in the room, I couldn't imagine what that would have been like back then. So she must have been a pretty strong lady.
Absolutely. And Sonja, do you think that there's an implication then for those who are coming through today in terms of how they follow in Helen Tippett's legacy and her footsteps?
Absolutely. Look, I think, and we've all sort of shared our stories tonight, that we've all been humbled, and we've all taken people along that journey as much as we could as well. And I think it's always looking out for those opportunities, and they may not be, very visual, or they may be also that, that person might not be in the room. So being that silent champion for others as well is really important. And I think that's what Helen Tippett did for all of us. I'm really grateful.
Some fantastic questions coming in via the chat. Colleen says, I was privileged to be on the judging panel for two of these women, and they do so much more than they have said. Maybe that's because they're humble. So how do they fit it all in and balance time for work, family, and themselves? So the million-dollar question there from Colleen. Who would like to dive into that one? How do you fit it all in?
I think what women tend to do is just keep pushing. I think keep pushing until they break. Unfortunately, yeah.
I think Anita is 100% right. We have sacrificed so much of ourselves, and I think it's just some days it feels like you're broken. and other days you feel you're riding high, but we have just all sacrificed so much to do this and to have this vision of a better life for others. I think it's really selfless. All these women, I'm just honored to be amongst them.
It's very special. And has that sacrifice and that cost been worth it, Priyani?
Some days, Jehan, no.
Mm.
Some days I think about what I missed out on, my kids growing up. I wasn't there for a lot of that because I was busy trying to fight for all these other women and myself so that they could have better lives. And then I think of all the failures where my efforts didn't really seem to have an effect on pay equity or better conditions for women or having ethnic women at the leadership table. A lot of that stuff I'm still fighting it. And on some days I think, God, is it worth it putting all that effort when I could have just been at home and in my, in the comfort of my home without fighting. But then other days someone succeeds and I smile and I think, yeah, you've done it. And maybe I had a little bit to play in helping you do that. So yeah.
Absolutely. Anita, can you tell us a little bit about what you're thinking and feeling at the moment?
Yeah, I think what we tend to do is we put on this big brave face until you hit a barrier and then you go, shit, if you can spend like me 30 years in the industry and hit a barrier that's so kind of intimidating sometimes, you do wonder what the hell you're doing, what it's all for. But then, like Priyani said, that's exactly why you do it, is for your, like, I have 3 daughters and hopefully have brought them up to be very strong wāhine that are forging their own path. But the women that maybe didn't have the support of their parents, like when I look at the women that work for me, I've got people that come from all walks of life, and some of them have succeeded against all the odds because people like the women on this panel have stepped outside of the boundaries and said, well, actually, I'm going to pick you up and bring you along with me. And I think that's what's really important about women, is that we look after each other as sisters and pull each other up and empower each other, because sometimes back in the day, I remember being, almost like torn down by women rather than the men at times. But to do all of that, I think we need to be superwoman. And that's actually almost a fault of women, is we feel like if we don't do everything, we're never going to be good enough. And then you break. And that's what I was thinking, is that when you hit burnout, it is pretty bad. Yeah.
So, Becky, what does sustainable leadership and advocacy look like, given what we've just heard?
Oh, yeah, look, it's that sustainability piece is key, right? And I can certainly relate to what Anita and Priyani are talking about, just the give. Some days you win, some days you lose, and you do just question, is it even making a difference? And that's really real. I think the sustainable part of it is making sure you're giving enough time to yourself, which is really easy to say, but when you've got a very intense job and lots of people that need you every 5 seconds, and you've got your own family and your own worries, it makes it really hard to find that time for yourself, but it does need to be a priority. And I think if you don't do it, you learn it the hard way. Your body will force you to do it. So it's something I'm trying to be a lot more mindful of now, is taking the time, saying no, trying to finish early on the days where I can, and actually leaving proudly instead of walking out the door feeling guilty that I'm skulking off at 4 o'clock. Reminding myself that I just pulled a 70-hour week the week before, so I actually can. But it's giving yourself the grace, because I think we don't do that. We just push more and more and more, and it's just really important to keep it in check with yourself, because no one's going to do that for you.
Great advice there. And Sonja, how do you look after your own well-being given these pressures?
Yeah, look, it's also checking, I guess, on my mental well-being at the time, and perhaps, if there's an opportunity of having a meeting outside, a walking meeting, if it's sunny, or doing something different, taking yourself out of that situation where you can. I know it's not always easy when you're on a construction site either. So, that having grace and looking after yourself is very key. And I personally knit. I know I think in my statement there was a bit about knitting and doing emotional support chickens for others, so they've got something to squeeze when it gets a bit tough.
Emotional support chickens.
Emotional support chickens.
Fantastic.
Yep. Yeah. Just something else to squeeze, right? When you're a little bit frustrated. So yeah, it can be anything. But yes, it is that we do always maybe not put ourselves number one, and that's been shown, I think, across time. Unfortunately, women put everybody else in front of them, and sometimes we do come last. So we do have to sometimes change that mindset.
So a related question from Eilish, and anyone can pick this up if it sparks a thought. All the speakers have achieved so much. How do you keep yourselves energized to keep going? So we've talked about sustainability and well-being, but where does your energy come from? Are there any particular relationships or practices or ways of working that you focus on that give you energy?
I think
sorry, Becky.
No, you jump in, love.
Oh, I talk about energy with my sisters, and it's surrounding myself with people and places that give me energy. Positive energy rubs off. And so if I can surround myself with really cool, energetic women and men, that really helps. And going to places like the beach, or I quite like the wind. The wind gives me energy. So it is just getting back to nature and the basics that gives me energy.
Beautiful. Anything else from our panel on the topic of energy?
I think you've got to carve out that time for yourself. Really important. What gives me energy is probably my family. So, got a little grandson. You've got to have energy to chase the 3-year-old boy around. Just finding the highlights in your day. Making time to go and do some sort of exercise. I think I've learnt, the hard way that I've got to look after myself, and sometimes that does mean, not being available to other people so that you can get to the gym, or you can go to the pool, or you can go for a walk, rather than sitting and doing another 2 hours of work, So I think, that's how I would push myself to get the energy, even though sometimes that's tiring just to do that.
Good on you for putting those boundaries in place. A few more questions now. Becky, this is a question for you from Holly. What advice would you give someone wanting to pursue a career in health and safety in their early 30s?
Oh, that's a great age to come into health and safety, I think. I think you've already got quite a bit of life experience by then, and I think that's a real key part in the health and safety game. It's about being able to have great conversations with people, being able to talk to people about difficult and courageous conversations. But I think what I would encourage you to do is, it's good to get a bit of technical stuff behind you. So there's lots of cool qualifications and online stuff you can do to close that gap. And if you're having trouble breaking through, reach out to someone and see if you can tag along with them. Go and have a look at some sites. Go and tag along with a health and safety manager or an advisor. Just see what it's like, and gain some real life experience that way. And I think a lot of people are quite happy to have you out there and tell you all about what they do. So I'm sure there'll be lots of open doors.
That's great. Stacey says, to each speaker, is there one opportunity that you missed doing or taking or saying and later wished you had? Was there an opportunity that slipped through your fingers, or one that you perhaps deliberately let go and you look back on it and think, I would make a different decision on that today?
Yeah, I have one when I did my degree late in life. I actually studied and completed my business degree. I think I graduated at about 40 while I was working full time. And around that time, I knew I wanted to go into operations management, maybe head to like a CEO type role. And I was thinking about doing a diploma in engineering to kind of back up the operational side of my background. And I was just a person encouraged me and said, no, you don't need to do that. You're a good leader as you are. Don't. That's just a lot of time for no reason. And I didn't. And today I regret that decision, because that extra technical expertise is probably the one thing that would have helped me break the glass ceiling that I find is in place in construction when you aren't an engineer. So yeah, I'd say if you want something, you've got to go get it and work hard to get it sometimes. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Anita. Anyone else?
Something that I did many years ago was to stay in a marriage too long after, and it was the relationship was just bringing me down, and I was trying to put everybody else ahead of my own health and well-being. And I just think that in terms of that, I should have left years earlier. I should have made the decision and left years earlier, but I put everyone else's life and career ahead of my own life and career, and I do regret that now. There's an upside. We're good friends now, but it wasn't always the way. And yeah, we both agree that we should have made those decisions earlier. And I think there's a lesson in that for all of us to not wait too long before making a life-changing decision if you see that things are not going well.
Wow. Thank you for sharing, Priyani. Kelly says, I saw an article a week or so ago where the number of women's events were questioned. And it was suggested, are they still needed because the momentum of change has stagnated? What are your thoughts on this, and how do we get the momentum of change moving forward to get equity?
Look, I don't think there's actually enough events happening. I mean, women technically put themselves, at the last rank behind, taking your kids to school, or taking them others to sports, or even working late to get that job done. And things have stagnated. We have globally seen a pause, and everybody thinking that women's rights and the way women's working rights are, that's fine, and we've achieved a significant amount. But actually, in the reality on the ground is, there is still massive pay gaps, up to sort of 20K in some areas, where a wāhine that's in a senior leadership role is getting paid less than her direct reports, just because they're male. And every day there is a situation where a female perhaps doesn't feel supported by her partner to take that next advance in the construction field, because it might mean that she might come home with better pay than he does, which is really unfortunate. So I think we collectively get together. The more that we get together, the more we share our stories, the more we understand the issues out there, and the more we understand how we can help and be humble about it, and incrementally do that. And we've got wonderful podcasts now out there. Shortchanged just recently was released, and that explains pay equity and the issues going backwards, right from when women's work was determined in the economy of scale not to be paid and the reasons for it. So we've got a long history, and I think we've still got a long way to go. But if we could collectively get together and support each other, I think we could make a change. And we've all got that opportunity this year by going out to the voting polls and choosing what we want to see.
Thanks, Sonja. So just before we wrap up, I'd love to ask each of you what your thoughts are on this word legacy, which is so integral to Helen Tippett's story and the continuing impact of her work. How do you see this idea of legacy? Do you think about your own personal legacy? And if so, what sort of legacy do you want to leave? Becky, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. So for me, legacy, it's leaving it better than what you found it. It's leaving some wood in the hut for others. And the legacy I want to leave is that I've lifted other people up along with me, that I've coached people, helped people see the opportunities and the goodness inside of them and their potential. I think that's the stuff that means the most to me, is really, because it's something that I needed. It's something that I really appreciate as well. So I think it's just repaying that favour. And if it can look better in 10 years' time to what it did 10 years ago when I joined, then I mean, that's a great legacy.
Awesome. Thank you, Becky. Anita?
Yeah, very, very similar. It's I guess walking the talk. Being able to put yourself out there, share your experiences, not shy away from sharing them. Like these sorts of things are horribly uncomfortable, but by doing them, hopefully that inspires someone else out there to go, yeah, I can, take that next step. I can be confident. I am going to have a crack. Like for me, that legacy is hopefully inspiring others that it's possible. Not necessarily inspiration around myself personally, but just that there are more and more women out there that are getting out there and doing it, and opening other women's eyes to that. Yeah, just doing it one step at a time. Like it's all you can do. Just keep trying to make things better.
Beautiful. Sonja, what about you?
Look, for me, it's, thinking about my daughter and hopefully her not having to experience what I've experienced over my years of working and having to justify, why other wāhine in my team should be deserved to pay the right rate versus, other male colleagues getting more just because they're fathers. We've all got families to support. We should all have those opportunities of jumping on diggers and cranes and just really being able to experience everything equally. So hopefully, yeah, she'll have a better, hopefully easier path. And if not, knowing where to get that support if necessary.
Thank you, Sonja. And the last word to Priyani.
Thanks, Jehan. I'm a bit of a fighter, and I just want to make sure that we don't settle for second best, that we don't have to talk about equity or inequity anymore, that we get paid the same, that our place is never questioned, and that we don't have to think about things in terms of women's needs and affairs, but that people are treated equitably. And I'll keep fighting for that for as long as I live. It's just inside me to do that. And I hope that my sons, I don't have daughters, my sons grow up realizing that women are the givers of life, but we are also just as strong and just as capable as any man.
It's an incredibly powerful note to end on, and we have some beautiful feedback coming in, which I'll share in a moment before we close the webinar. But first, I'd like to hand over to the president of NAWIC, Kirsty Hopewell. Kirsty, over to you.
Hi, Jehan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. So before we finish, I just want to say a huge thank you. Thank you to Jehan for leading such a thoughtful conversation, and to our incredible Helen Tippett Award recipients for sharing your stories so openly. Your honesty, generosity, and willingness to lift others is exactly what the Helen Tippett Award represents. I'd also like to extend a sincere thank you to Neda Love, our awards partner, whose ongoing support helps make the NOIC Excellence Awards possible. One of the things I've loved most about tonight is the reminder that leadership isn't about titles or positions. It's about showing up, creating opportunities for others, and leaving the industry better than you found it. That's the legacy we've been celebrating tonight, and it's one that continues to inspire us all. Thank you to everyone who's joined us tonight. We hope you've taken away a few ideas, a bit of inspiration, and perhaps a reminder that every one of us has the ability to make a difference. If you've enjoyed tonight, we'd love to see you in Wellington next week as our 30-year celebration continue. We're kicking things off with a 30-year cocktail celebration Thursday evening, followed by our Building Influence conference on Friday, before finishing with the NOIC Excellence Awards in partnership with Neda Love on Friday night. There's still tickets available for all three events, but registrations close on Sunday. If you'd like to join us, head to the NOIC website where you'll find all the event details and ticket information. So thank you all again for spending your evening with us, and hopefully we'll see many of you in Wellington next week.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kirsty, and a very big week coming up next week. There's so much feedback in the chat. I'll leave you all to read that after the event, but I'll just highlight this one from Kisa, who says, from someone tuning in from the islands working on a construction project, I have found your reflections and experiences invaluable. Really appreciate the session, and thank you to our speakers. So thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for your openness and for sharing not just your professional insights, but sharing so generously about your personal lives as well. We really appreciate it. So thank you to all of you. This has been the second in a series of webinars hosted by NAWIC, and we'll have another one for you in a few months' time. The recording of this session will be available on YouTube in the next few days. You can also take a look at our previous session, which was looking at the power of women in construction. You'll find that on the NAWIC YouTube channel. Thanks again for carving out an hour of your evenings to join us. Have a fantastic week, and we look forward to seeing you at next week's conference and awards. Ngā mihi.